Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to another video of GM prep and GM recaps for the game Simbarum. So this is the morning after the session 36. I was a bit wary coming into that session. As you saw in the last video, I wasn't completely, I hadn't figured everything out, and I was just rushed by life because I had a big week. And so when I came into the session, I was maybe a bit more tired or stressed out as I would like to be. But the session was really fun. We really had a nice session, and at the end of the session, two of my players stayed around a bit. They told me that they really liked it, and that that they noticed that I had prepared lots of stuff for them, which I thought was nice of them to say, because downtime sessions or a period of lull in the adventure is actually really fun for those character scenes where we role play interactions with characters. But since to keep the story flowing and to keep it natural, the party can't be always together. In a downtime, it doesn't make sense that the party is always walking together in marching order, It's real life going on, so they have things to do, they split up. It's been the second session in a row where we're going from one to another to another to another. So the players were a bit more isolated, and it's more one-on-ones with NPCs and the player. So for me, it's really intense because I'm working a lot as all these NPCs. But compared to the last session, I would say it was less. There was more time for them to just interact together and figure out what they want to do next and all of that. And they did it in character, and it was really nice that they did so, because I really don't like when it devolves in just metagame discussions. So I'll tell you at the end of this video what takeaway I take from this session. I will try to make it shorter. I know I'm always long because I don't know, I speak too much, but I'll try to gather my thoughts and be as quick as possible. So before I start looking at my notes and telling you what happened, what I used, what I didn't use, what was a problematic or not, I would just like to point out right away that if you like what I do on this channel, you can, it's actually a really big help to support by clicking on the subscribe buttons and all that stuff, and to go check out Playing with Goblins if you haven't done so yet. It's on Drive-Thru RPG. It's an adventure for Simbarum. It includes a detailed goblin village and some rules for a wild chase through the forest. So here we go. Let's start this recap of session 36. These are the notes that I had, that I printed. So at the top here we had the questions that I needed answers to. And did I do what I said I would do? So what I did, most of the group was at Ordo Magica down here. Lodemei had followed the first tier El Feno and Anadea at the end of last session. And she had traveled to the temple, so she was in the temple already. So we started the session there at Ordo Magica, in the street, on Summer Street. I described a bit of the ambience. Because it was around 4 o'clock, it's the equivalent of December or something, so it's getting dark really early, so it was already getting dark. There's a little snow falling, the muddy streets. I told them that some of the streets of the nicer part of town in the south are starting to get paved, but it's all just a work in process. Most of the streets are just earth, so they're all muddy, and they have wooden sidewalks on the sides of certain streets. And so they were there. I described a bit just of the ambience of the end of the day, because the sun is going down, and in medieval times the day ends when the sun goes down. So you don't really you don't keep on working till 9 because your boss told you so. It's just the sun's down, it's over, you go home. So that was what was going on around them. And they had a little chat there. They pondered a bit of what their next things would do. They started walking while chatting, so that was all PC to PC interaction. That was great for me. And when they got to the corner of Winter Street, right here, I described to them what's on the corner here, number 1. And I did that because I like to have First of all, I want them to discover Thistlehold because they're new to Thistlehold, and I want to just always add little bits of it as we go along. So I described this tavern that I had described for myself in these notes of mine on the districts of Thistlehold, and they just went by and kept on going. But funnily enough, that became something useful later on in the game. So I did not start with the scene with the bull and the raven coming down to him. I just decided for some reason. I said, okay, I hadn't gathered my thoughts already, so I wasn't sort of ready to play Yagaba yet. I needed a bit of time to collect myself, and so that was perfect. I just let them roleplay for a while. And then they went up Winter Street, through the Antique Plaza, up this street here. And this on the corner, this is the shop of Edogai. That's where he's a blacksmith and a bit of a clockwork kind of guy. Of course, there aren't any clocks in that world, but maybe there are, but they're probably in the city states or somewhere else. He does really detailed, very intricate stuff, and he wants to be an artifact crafter. So that's their home base in Thistlehold. That's where they live. We have a nice little description of that place that we created together. So they just sort of had a continued chat there. They decided, okay, basically they said, we're rich. We need to just have a moment to celebrate. So and that was Bo, the goblin. He was in great energy, and he said, let's go to Afadir's Triumph Tavern that we just crossed back there. And so you see that the fact that I described that did influence the flow of the story, because it's always the principle that as a GM you offer things for the players to interact with. If you just spice in every scene with something, there's some guy on the roof nearby repairing the shingles. There's a couple with a woman with a baby in her arms arguing in front of their house. There's whatever. You just when the players are having these player-to-player interactions, especially when they're in taverns, on the street, places like that, normally they're talking and you're waiting. So don't be completely passive. Of course, it's really fun to just take in their role play. You get to be a spectator too. You get to be entertained. You don't need to work all the time. This isn't work. This is a game. We're there to have fun. But if you do have a little idea of something that it's just an element of the background that suddenly stands out. Like, I don't know, in a tavern, it's the rah. You set the ambience of the tavern when they get in. And they have that in their mind. Everybody's imagining that scene. And then suddenly some patron jumps on a table and start playing the fiddle. Okay? Something like that. Or there's a loud argument that breaks out. Or, I don't know, the innkeeper is really jovial that night and offers a free round of drinks to everyone because his daughter is 16 or something like that. Of course, you don't want to cut off their discussion, but you want to just add a bit of flavor, add a bit of life, and sometimes it's a signal for meta discussions that are going round and round, that life is going on, time is ticking, without having you in meta talk telling the players, okay, are we done? Can we make a vote on this and move on? Of course you can do that, and it's a very efficient way to get the game moving again, but it does take you out of the immersion. So I would say that sometimes you can try with little ingredients like that to just it's like a signal and a little push on the players, but that is in game and that is very subtle and very non-disruptive. But experienced players will pick up on it and will say, okay, yeah, we need to get moving now. The place is emptying. The bar, the tavern keeper is wiping the tables, and so that kind of stuff. So that was a long tangent, but basically I was just happy that it paid off. When I described the Afadir's Triumph Tavern, I didn't expect anything to come out of that, but it gave them the idea to go there and have fun. And that's where I reverted to my initial plan because they split up. Mikariol wanted to go to the academy, that's here, the Academy Master Vernon. Vild went to the temple to get Lodemei. So everybody was spreading out. Edogai went to the Tower of the Ordo Magica to ask for Tobela and then went to Afadir's to make a reservation. It's not an actual reservation like today because that would be very anachronistic. But he just wanted to warn Afadir that there was a big group coming, to know if there's any tables available and to get the pots cooking, you know. Since everybody split up, and Beau decided that he would go get the barbarian Mirizin, who is staying at the Witch and Familiar, the Witch and Familiar being here. So I decided to zoom in on Beau because I wanted to start the session with Beau, and now was my chance. So we followed Beau on the street. I described just very slightly the ambience on the street. It was getting dark. It was almost completely nighttime by now. When he got to the Queen's Squares, everybody was, wrapping up. The square was emptying completely. And when he went by, I mentioned to the players, I said, well, in the previous session, we played Mirizin getting really drunk with Alomar at the Witch and Familiar and paying rounds because he received his share of the spoils. So I didn't want to retcon that. So what I said, maybe you could stop by Jurgoi's, that's right here. That's the alchemist shop that I wanted him to go to. It was really funny because, as I said in my prep video, since everything's a first, we're in the beginning of the campaign, they're discovering the city, they're doing their downtime activities for the first time. So I want to have little presentation moments of these NPCs, of these locations, of what they're doing during their downtime. So I wanted to have this little interaction with Beau and Jurgoi. And so when he came in, Jurgoi was finishing to serve a lady with some kind of powder or unguent. She paid, she left. And he really candidly told him that he wanted to learn from him and work with him and learn how to make purple sap. And there was this nice little interaction. Jurgoi was really like a bit surprised and curious, but ready to throw him out. And he had the great idea, the player, to tell him, I'm looking for in his ingredients for something to make a mix of, to show him that I can do alchemy for real. And so he made a vigilant test that he failed to try to find something exotic or something really wow. And he made a cunning test, which he succeeded. So succeeded, actually he failed by 3. And I told him, okay, so since you failed by 3, I didn't give you any bonus for the fact that you're in a place where all the tools are available. And also, depending on the time that you take. So I said, so you failed your first batch, but if you're willing to spend an hour more or 2 to continue to do the mixing, then I'll give you the success. And we'll just say that Beau, he messed up the first batch and he just feigned that it wasn't finished yet, and he put this on the side and we have to do this now and actually he made a new batch. And so that was really funny. It was a sel d'Epsom salts mixed with some herbs, and it's a super relaxant that you put in your bath. That's what he made. So he made bath salts basically for Yagoi, and he told them, use these and you'll be completely relaxed and it's gonna be great. And Jurgoi just told him, okay, I'll try them, and if they do work, then we will speak again tomorrow. And I might be interested. So the whole part that I had prepared, where Jurgoi would try to make Beau an ally on a commercial sense to send him back to the Vale and bring him plants, that's for later. So that was just a first encounter. And Beau left and went to the Witch and Familiar. There we had a raucous scene where he interrupted Mirizin in his revelry, and that was really fun. A lot of songs, a lot of banging tables, and a lot of barbarian good cheer, and that was really fun. And of course, he didn't want to come, so Beau went to get to the others at the Afadir's Triumph Tavern. There we had a scene where they ate, they spent like hell. They invited the Templar Malesio. Lodemei invited the Templar Malesio and his squire, the squire Kaina. Kaina is a low-born squire, probably won't ever be a knight, and she was completely out of her depth. Tobela was there too, still dark, still shook, but trying to put on a brave face. They had quite a few very interesting discussions there. They learned some things about Malesia. They learned some things about the intentions of Tobela. Basically, she wants to go back to the Vale, but now that she's into Solod, she sort of realizes how worn she is, and she needs at least a week to recover, maybe more. And Edogai asks her if he could learn from her, because he wants to continue working on his wizardry, and she accepted. So in a week they will start working together, and actually his goal is to monitor her state. So that's really interesting. And I gave them a few roles of vigilant, because when they were talking about the Veil and going back and all of that, she actually knows that Kulinan Furia is going back. She's sort of in that cabal. Actually, right now, she almost told them. She was thinking of maybe spilling the beans, but she didn't. And they could have noticed. They noticed that something was going on, and she wasn't. Actually, Edogai noticed that something was weird, and so that's an example of having again a scene where it's mostly merrymaking and just banter between players, but actually they were pretty focused on the story too. So they were sort of deciding what they wanted to do next, and combining it with a bit of tension, just a very teeny weeny bit, and that becomes trying to read the NPCs, trying to know what their goals are, who they are, and stuff like that. Learning some new information. If you have such scenes, maybe just prepare just one thing per NPC, like a secret they could reveal, or the state of mind that they're in, that they're trying to hide, or just a little something that curious PCs can sort of dig around for. Even if it's very slight, it's just fun for PCs to interact with the world and to get something out of it. So it doesn't really matter if it's that important to the story. It doesn't ruin the pleasure of a PC to understand that, okay, this person hates mussels and finds them disgusting, and is trying to hide the fact that that plate of mussels is just making her want to puke. So it's just, it can be really, really unimportant or comic relief kind of things, and it's still super it's just little, as I always say, some ammunition that you have for the scenes. So after this revelry, Mirezin arrived in a complete disastrous state. They just turned him around and brought him back home. Everybody went to bed, and in the morning, for the night, I had them all roll strong. The ones that failed, Bo fumbled, so he was completely out for until 1:30 in the afternoon the next day. And the others, the only one that really got up early was Lodemei, that got up at the temple for the morning prayers. So Lodemei was sort of leading the next day because she got up before everyone. She came back to the shop. She found Edogai working on his flaming servant, trying to repair him with blacksmithing. He was really engrossed. She had something to reveal to the group, and she wanted to get everybody together. So she did that. Seeing that he was really engrossed, she went to the town seat to find Agramai Kalfas. During the Afadir's Triumph Tavern talk, she talked to Malesio about who was Aaron Kalfas, where's his family and all that, and she learned that his uncle, Agramai Kalfas, was here in Thistlehold. And I couldn't find my notes on his ancestry because I forgot that I put them in my little notebook. So I just made up that he's the uncle, and we'll see when I find them. That's one of the takeaways I'll talk about at the end. But that was really cool. That you see, that when we say that we don't know what the PCs are doing, this is a really great example, because I did not expect this. So I did have my if I go here, my description of the town seat that I added stuff to. Here it is. Okay, so the center house of stone, because if you see, it's at like a half circle, the first part. So I decided I really like the illustration for Inderos, where you can see it's that tavern that's sort of Zarekian. It has a big wall with some kind of weird insect-like carvings on it, and it's really like it feels like an underground, like a ruin that you could find at the bottom of the ocean almost. It's really really interesting, and I really like that kind of iconography for everything that's Simbarian or Lindaros times. Or so I decided that there was a tower there, and that they used the tower to do the central part. So of course it's just the base of a tower. So this central part here is completely stone and has those kind of weird carvings on it. And the two wings are in heavy timber, and those were added. And so he went in there, she went in there, she talked to the clerk, she convinced him that it was important to meet Mr. Kalfas if he was there. He was available. They went into the wing here, and his office is at the end here, overlooking the Antique Plaza. I described all of that, and they got to talk, and we had a really nice scene, a really nice roleplay scene where, of course, all the way through, I was always tempted to add in just a little spice of weirdness to him or something, but I refrained to do so because it's. First of all, I made a secret roll of persuade for him just for fun, and I rolled 3. So he was really effective in playing the part of a sad uncle. So I played that. Really, he was very jovial at first because that's his reputation. He's very jovial, and he was eating some porridge and had a tea and was reading some papers when she came in, and he just very lively sort of told her that he didn't know anything about their mission, only that they went, and apparently they came back triumphant, so he said bravo to you and blah blah blah. And then she spilled the beans, and it was really interesting, this conversation, because as he was asking for more detail on what happened, and she was slowly getting to the point where she had to tell him that she killed him. So that was a nice tension in that discussion. And then she left and she went back to the group. And just to wrap up, we're getting to the end here. She got everybody together at the shop, and she told them about what Deseba asked of her, without naming Deseba, of course. She asked the group to trust her and to not ask too many questions, but that in exchange they would get some drops of the water of the dusk to get rid of their permanent corruption. So everybody's really motivated about that. And so they wondered, okay, so how should we start this investigation and blah blah blah. And they of course they quickly realized that they're probably the same people, the ones that attacked Edogai and his flaming servant, and the ones that are harassing Sarvola. And Lodemei even had the intuition that Baumelo, the witch hunter, might be involved. So that's quick thinking, and that's my table. My players are pretty good at rooting out the plot. They really, they've watched a lot of series, and they just know plot. And of course they saw a link between the methods of Baumelo and these fanatics. Like up to now, I had the whole session was completely led by the PCs, by the players, which is fine because it's a sort of a downtime session. So that's the fun part. They get to do what they want in the order that they want. Oh, I forgot. Oh God, I forgot about the encounter with Yagaba. Sorry about that. Completely zapped my mind. But anyways, I'll come back to that. So the two events where I as the GM throw something at the players was the encounter with Yagaba at the beginning of the session, and at the end of the session what I'm about to describe. Just for a quick recap of the encounter with Yagaba, it's when Bo went to Jurgoi's, and then he went to go get Mérizine in the street here, exactly at this point here. I said that there were some lanterns, like a lot of light at the east at the west gate, and some lanterns here at the crossroads, but in between no light, just maybe a few little lamps in front of certain houses. So really dark here in this part because it was nighttime and there was no stars and no moon. And I had the great raven form of Yagaba just go right over his head and drop behind him on the street in the mud. And then she transformed into this, impressive silhouette, and they had their interaction there, and that was a nice little roleplay moment. And then she left and she asked Bo to invite the group, only the ones that were in the Vale, to Lassie for Night Pitch's mansion the next day at night for supper. So that was the first event. So the effect of that first event was that Bo had something to say to the party, but they didn't want to say it in front of the NPCs. So it's like a reveal that's coming. We know that it's coming. Bo is going to tell the party at some point, but we don't know when. It's just a very subtle thing, but that's the kind of ingredient that creates a bit of, it's not tension as much as just wanting to know how it will play out. Like they do in television series. There's always something that you say, I'm curious to know what will happen when this will happen. Because there's promises of further action. It's a dramatic trigger, if you want. You seed that in, and then everybody knows it's coming at some point in the future of this story, but we don't know when. So we're just expecting this to happen at some point, and it keeps our interest up. A dramatic interaction has an opening state, and then it stays open until the resolution where it closes and it's done. So when it's open, that's the tension. That's dramatic tension, and that's what you want to use in role-playing also, because it works also for role-playing. So at the end of the session, when we were back at this the shop, they were starting to get on the investigation of the sellswords of the sun. I wanted to end the session with something, with a surprise, with something. I had Mirizin make a vigilant roll since he wasn't talking with the others, and he saw by the window that people were coming in running, talking to people in front of their homes. And so he went out, asked what was going on, and he learned that there was fire at the Toad Square and that the toad was on fire. And so he picked up his things, told it to the rest of the group, and left. And then we had an action scene. As I often say, you don't need combat, but sometimes you need, it's fun to have some action. So they ran up the promenade all the way to the Toad Square, showed them the image of the Toad Square, told them about how many people there were. Lodemei arrived first because she's on horseback, and she met the 4 guards that were there. And I used my table of names and characters that I showed you in another video. I had Laras with long blonde hair and wary be the like the sergeant or the leader of this little 4-man squad. There was a bit of fire at the feet of the statue. There was something inscribed on the base of the statue, and there were big splashes of yellow paint. So if you remember, that was the move number 1, paint on the toad. That's great, because I did a lot of prep for this session, but there's so much that has not been used. We'll see at the end. Well, Lodemei galloped as soon as the guards told her that they had seen from afar, because they were in the towers of the North Gate, this mob of vandals left running and scrambled in this part of town. And so they didn't even pursue, because it's a labyrinth of little nooks and crannies, and they don't like going there anyways. Lodemei, she galloped like this. And then here, she made a vigilant test, and she saw in the mud a yellow sash right here that was lost. She took it. She went in these little, very narrow, in French we call them venelles, so it's like even narrower than an alleyway. Like if you look at it's probably 1.5 meters wide, maybe 2 meters at some points. You can't even go on horseback there. You have to get down from your horse, because or else your knees will scrape on the walls. It's full of detritus, and it's very disgusting, which is pretty unusual for Thistlehold. And there she met an old man smoking his pipe, his door open on the alley. And she bribed him. I introduced the bribing rules that are in the Advanced Player's Guide, I think, where depending on the level of danger that you're asking for, or service, the price is based on the daily income of that class of character. And so she asked him to break a rule, because she wanted him to stool the people possibly from his neighborhood, which he, of course, in a poor neighborhood, you stick together. You don't tell the authorities about anything. So she's perceived as an authority, being a Templar. But she gave him a silver coin. So one Orteg would have given her a roll. She would roll to try to succeed and convince him, because that was the right price. She gave him a shilling, so that's a shilling, a silver shilling, and so that was 10 more times than what would be expected. So she got the automatic success. And he told her about these bands of youngsters putting yellow sashes on their faces and doing mischief, and that they might be from this neighborhood, and maybe he shouldn't be telling her, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're from somewhere else. He doesn't know. And that he noticed that they were wearing very pale tunics and had a lot of symbols of the sun on them. So there were clearly some kind of devout fanatics. And she thanked him, and she left. They all gathered at the shop, and we're getting closer to the feast at Lassifor Night Pitch at night home. So there was one last thing that they did before that, was to go see Sarvola. So the mission house is number 31 down here. They sent Edogai, Mikariol, the two mages, with a flaming servant, super discreet. And no, they decided to opt for the barbarian Mirezin that was standing back just in case. So they went there, and I played the scene. For those who own the module, Wrath of the Warden, if you go see that part of the story, when they get there, there's a whole host of people waiting for their turn to meet Father Sarvola. So I had that described, and I had described a bit more what the house looks like in my Thistlehold document. And I told them that they couldn't really see in the back where he was, but he was clearly meeting one by one. And I have this, so there, actually, that's the mission house here. Description of the mission house, and then we have the characters. And Galeno, the young missionary, an ex-Black Cloak, is here. So that's the character I use to interact with the PCs as one of the staff of Sarvola. So they met this young Galeno, and they started to talk. They wanted to get in. He went to see. Sarvola was busy, doesn't feel threatened, doesn't need help, and so they had to wait. During that time, while they wait, of course, I had Alwyn come up to them, and there was a really nice scene where he showed his twig to Mikariol. So the twig thing is actually in the adventure, Wrath of the Warden. So right there, I can thank the writers. And he had this twig of oak tree, because it needed to be something that cannot be alive during the winter. I wanted them to be mystified about this. So he showed the twig. We played that out. Mikariol was a bit fascinated by this young man. He wanted to see, to ask him if he liked to be wowed by something else, and he said, look at the ceiling, it's a normal ceiling, and Alwyn didn't agree. He thought the ceiling was wonderful. And then he used Mirage, a boon that he has, to make it look golden. And then Alwyn told him that he liked it before better, and so he moved the gold away, and he was just a bit flummoxed by this young kid. But they learned that he says he's Sarvola's son and all of that. There was a nice moment where they discovered the character, and they learned some things about Sarvola and this character. And then that's the fun of the dice and of the game. Our friend Edogai took the twig and used his he has a lesser artifact that gives him witch sight. It's a homebrew, if you will. I just let him buy the witch sight ability, and instead of being actual witch sight, it's an artifact that he created. So he's using that to look at the twig. So he rolled a 20. He has a burden called I think it's epilepsy, I think it's called, or he gets these strokes and attacks when he rolls a fumble. So he falls to the ground. He's going like this. Mikariol asks for help. Mirezin arrives, puts something in his mouth. Mikariol uses his bend will ability to try to control the body and calm him down. And of course, Sarvola comes up because there's a crisis. When he comes up, everything is resolved because of the quick thinking of Mikariol that used the bend will. And he has a short chat with them. And basically he says, because they're telling, you're threatened, we want to help, how can we help, blah, blah, blah. And he says to Mikariol, can you wash clothes? Can you cook? Can you serve food to the needy? And Mikariol says, no, it's not the thing I do. This is not my priority, blah, blah, blah. He really playing very well this ambitious young mage that has absolutely no intention of washing anything. And he's a noble too. And so Sarvola just said, well, then you can't help me. And he went back in. So it was really funny because the players sort of looked at each other after that and were like, okay, we got to help this grumpy old man. Fuck him. Oops, sorry. But you know, that was a really nice scene. So that's how we finished the evening. Let's finish this video by just quickly looking at what I used, and I'll give you my end thoughts of how did this go for the prep versus the actual session. So this part here with Bo and Yagaba we did. Bo at Jurgoi we did. Wild Studies and Mikhail Plays with Fire we did not. We didn't get there yet. We will get there. So that's already prepped if you want. This we didn't use any of this. So that's great. This is coming up. Of the Cell Swords of the Sun, we used the move number 1. So that's coming up too. And Lodemei in Malaysia we used. We had a talk. I used all this information during the scene at Afadir's Triumph Tavern. So that's a really good example of very simple things that I had prepared that enabled me to play this character in an interesting way. I did miss having the short description with, you know, I don't know why these characters, I insist on not imagining them thoroughly, but I did give them in the moment. I ad-libbed things that I have to note down to not forget. But now I know that this Squire Kaina is a lowborn. She's really shy and out of her depth with noble and erudite people. She probably doesn't even know how to read properly, just enough to read the scriptures. Malaysia also had got into his own a bit more. Visit to the mission house we did. This we did not use, and I hadn't created it yet, so that's perfect. This is just behind the scenes. I'll just have to do the NPC timelines a bit more, just to make everything clear, make sure that I don't mess up later on. We didn't come back to this, so that's still up in the air. We did not do this. So basically I've prepared for 2 sessions. So I feel less bad that I took so much time, because I think I put in at least 3 hours, maybe 2.5, 3 hours, something like that. We did not use this here because they're not onto that yet. We used Jurgoi, and that's about it. Let's conclude this video with what are my takebacks of this session. First of all, I had too much stuff. I prepared. I guess I needed to have this to be able to see a bit further in the future than this next session. So I had to, because we're starting a new adventure basically. So I had to have an idea of what these cell swords are about, where it's going. But it was just comfort for me, because realistically I should have known that it wouldn't happen this session. So I didn't really need to create anything more than just what will the cell swords do this session, and that was the move number 1. Maybe I could have 2 moves just to make sure, but not the whole story, not the whole thing. So I over prepared there, and the problem when you over prepare, and that's what I lived, is that the notes become unwieldy. It's like an 8-page, 9-page document. I mean, I can't use that while I play. I was always looking for stuff, and it's really a pain. It's really a pain. And I'm thinking that my notebook method is much better, and I think I will go back to that. So probably in the next videos I will use this notebook to write my prep by hand. It will look like pages like this with sometimes little scribbles and stuff. I'll try to write in a readable way, and I will just take pictures of that and use that for the videos. Because what is the advantage of having this? There's multiple advantage of having this. First of all, it's really easy to manipulate at the table as you're GMing. That's the first part. Second part, if I go to, okay, Malizio and the Squire, I move to their page, I have their description on the page. If I add any detail to him, that he's like this, he has a wart or whatever, I just add it on the page. Maybe in another color, maybe a little note in red. So I don't have to. So it's like, it becomes like a living rule book, if you want. It's a living notebook. So things will add up, and I know where to find them because I know my notebook. You know, when you've read a book multiple times, you know where things are in the book. When you're writing yourself the book, it's even more so the case, because I have this book and I have things in the computer, and it becomes all over the place. So when I'm looking for something, I don't know where it is. And the other thing is, before, what I did is I was creating all these notes, and then I decided, okay, let's create session notes, and I create just session by session the technique. But then I would copy paste stuff from other sessions. I would say, okay, this character might show up, so I'll take his description from session 22 and I'll copy paste it into session 35, so I can have it on hand. The problem is that when I GM, I have printed out versions of my documents, and I jot notes on them as I'm GMing, because he has a wart on his, all the stuff that I add it by hand here. So if I want to be thorough, that would mean that after a game, I have to go through my notes, type down what I added on the paper, put it in the document, and of course, I think most of you might think, well, that's nothing, just do it. And no, that's not nothing. I want to spend as less time as I can prepping these games, because the fun part is the game. That's why I'm doing it. I'm not a world builder. I don't want to spend hours in front of my computer typing out stuff that will never be used. Life is too short for that. I'm not 23 anymore. I have multiple things to do. So I'm sure some of you out there listening to this video feel like I do. If you're a world builder and you really like doing that part of the game, and it's like a solo mode kind of thing for you, that's fine. That's great. Enjoy. I just have some other interests that take also time, and I can't combine both. And I'll be frank, I don't find that much of a pleasure world building. That's why I like using printed material. I like reading other settings that have been created by people. Because when I want to create things of my own, I have the filmmaking part of my life for that. And that's where I get to create stuff from scratch, But if I didn't have the filmmaking aspect, probably maybe I would make world building, and I would probably be tempted by writing novels out of those worlds. So that's another discussion. So to go back to this, my take back is just, I'm going to move back to paper. I will really try to do the 100% paper on like these from now on. And I think that I just have a good feeling about it. I think it will work. I think I will never look back, and I think you will get to read my scribbly writing on the screen many times from now on. And I hope that it will let me get even more efficient with my prep. Of course, documents like the Thistlehold, memo, things like that, or tables, or sort of general setting stuff will remain things that I put in the computer and that I print out, because there's not that much of it. So I don't mind. It's just like another supplement. It's like having another book. But for my notes, I will use this. So there you go. So this was the recap from session 36, and I hope you have fun watching these videos. Please comment, tell me what you think of how I work out these preps, and tell me also if you would like something else, or like me to try something else on YouTube. If you have any fun things to talk about, I'll be happy to answer to your comments. Well, we'll conclude with that. I'll take a little coffee, and I'll wish you a nice week, a nice month, a nice winter. Take care, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.